Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about how powerful Iran's Mudstone missiles really are. Also, the renowned international relations professor Mearsheimer said that it would be a huge mistake for the US if Iran joins the war. If they get dragged into the chaos in the Middle East, they'll be forced to shift their focus away from China. On the night of June 18th, Iran and Israel launched airstrikes and missile attacks against each other in Sharon, causing damage in multiple locations and casualties. Israel sent dozens of fighter jets in a series of strikes on various targets in Tehran, while Iran, for the first time, fired Mudstone ballistic missiles at Israel in retaliation, once again attacking Israeli intelligence agencies and air force bases. The Leisure missiles have a range of up to 2,000 kilometers. Since the conflict began on June 13th, this is the first time Iran has used this type of missile to strike Israel. According to Israel's public radio, Iran launched about 5 missiles, of which at least 3 were intercepted. A Leisure missile has a range of 2,000 kilometers, and the warhead reaches up to Mach 8, 8 times the speed of sound. It uses a 2-stage solid fuel propulsion system, has strong maneuverability, a short launch preparation time, and the warhead weighs about 1 ton. It can carry high explosive warheads, armor-piercing warheads, or cluster munitions. As a long-range, super-heavy missile, its warhead can carry about 300 kilograms of explosives, with destructive power equivalent to a 500-kilogram aerial bomb. If a high-explosive warhead is used, it can cause severe damage to unprotected targets within a radius of several dozen meters. But this ballistic missile is not even Iran's most advanced missile. Iran's most advanced missiles at the moment should be the Fateh-1 and Fateh-2. If we really want to analyze hypersonic missiles, why did Iran make such a high-profile announcement about launching this ballistic missile? Mainly, there are 4 reasons. First, using missiles allows you to carry different types of warheads, which means you can effectively destroy targets, important military targets of Israel, the US, and others. Second, it uses a 2-stage solid fuel propulsion system, unlike many Iranian missiles that use liquid fuel. Launch preparation time is shorter and mobility is better. Simply put, if the US military joins the fight and launches a first wave of strikes against Iran, this type of missile has strong mobility and survivability and can retaliate against the US military. Third, with its 2,000-kilometer range, it covers most US military bases in the Middle East and can even reach key US bases in the central Indian Ocean. In West Asia, at present, a large number of US military aircraft are deployed there. Fourth, there are rumors that Iran is mass-producing the Fateh-110 missile, with some claims at the time boasting numbers as high as 10,000 units. The Iranian military has said that under extreme circumstances, these Fateh missiles would be used in a saturation attack to cover Israel. Although it's said that the number claimed is definitely exaggerated, even if there are a few hundred or over 1,000, that's still a significant amount. According to reports from the Jerusalem Post, if Iran maintains its current level of attack, Israel will run out of interceptor missiles for its air defense system within 10 to 12 days. Anonymous Israeli officials have revealed that Israel has already started rationing its interceptors and is being forced to choose which targets to intercept, because the air defense system is already overwhelmed. This kind of private warning is basically Iran telling the US that if it joins the war or sends its military facilities to the Middle East, they could face a massive barrage of missiles deployed by Iran. On the other hand, the US is currently struggling with the decision of whether or not to get involved. If the US decides to join the war, it's certain that their primary target will be Iran's Fordow nuclear facility, mainly because only the US has heavy bunker buster bombs capable of striking Iran's underground nuclear sites. Israel doesn't have this kind of attack capability. The Fordow nuclear facility is located about 30 kilometers south of Qom City in Iran, in a mountainous area. This facility is built 90 meters underground within a layer of rock, and inside, there are a large number of centrifuges used for producing enriched uranium. The underground design is meant to withstand potential airstrikes. This increases the facility's survivability. Israel has listed it as a top strike target but cannot attack it now. On June 16, Israel's ambassador Michael Herzog said that to carry out an airstrike on Iran's Fordow facility, bombs with even greater penetrating power would be needed. Israel is referring to the US-made 30,000-pound GBU-57 bunker buster, a massive bomb that currently can only be carried by America's B-2 stealth bombers. According to assessments by the US Department of Defense, this type of bomb can only destroy targets up to 65 meters underground. To effectively strike the Fordow nuclear facility, which is 90 meters underground, it would require using 2 bombs in succession, one after the other, to achieve a chain penetration effect. However, the US military has never publicly verified the feasibility of this tactic. Is there any catch? Although the bomb has been tested multiple times, it has never actually been used in real combat. According to a report by ABC News, Trump's advisors revealed that one of the main issues troubling Trump recently is whether, if the US gets involved in a conflict and drops the massive bunker buster bomb, it can really destroy Iran's most heavily defended Fordow nuclear facility. There's no large-scale plan, just a hope to make sure of that. The aim of such a strike is to avoid dragging the US into a prolonged war in the Middle East, and more importantly, to see if it can really achieve the goal of halting Iran's nuclear program. According to US officials, 5 top officials told Trump they are confident the mission can be accomplished, but it's still unclear whether Trump fully believes this claim. Trump's doubts about the certainty of success for this operation is also one of the factors he's weighing up right now. Whether or not to launch a strike depends on this, among other reasons. Besides the military effectiveness, whether it makes sense for the US to get involved from a strategic perspective is also a major issue. Professor John Mearsheimer, a political science professor at the University of Chicago and author of The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, will be interviewed to talk about whether the US should get involved in the war. Mearsheimer is well known for his realist views, as mentioned in the interview with Observer. He mainly expressed a few points. First, neither Israel nor the United States has any way to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities. Mearsheimer believes that, at this stage, Iran is not actively developing nuclear weapons, and what they are doing is enriching uranium to 60%. If they enrich it to 90%, then they can obtain nuclear weapons. Weapons-grade nuclear material, and raising the enrichment from 60% to 90% is actually quite easy. Iran's uranium enrichment technology is advanced, and they are fully capable of producing enough weapons-grade material for about 10 nuclear bombs within just 2 weeks. But this isn't the bomb itself after that. They still have to actually build the bomb and then load it onto a ballistic missile for delivery. Most people believe this whole process would take about a year. So, it would take a whole year to actually make a nuclear weapon that could be deployed quickly. People have always thought that if you were Iran's national security advisor, Iran should have had nuclear weapons by now. So, the main point of debate isn't whether Iran is currently developing nuclear weapons. It's about whether they are getting close to a critical point where they could easily switch to having nuclear weapons. Israel's real intention, of course, is to completely destroy Iran's uranium enrichment capability, because as long as Iran's enrichment capability is destroyed, they won't be able to make nuclear weapons. The key question is whether the US can actually stop Iran from having this capability. Next, if Iran really wants to get nuclear weapons, the US basically has no way to stop them. Experts from all sides have said this before, and recently I heard former Israeli Prime Minister Barak mention this point, saying that if Iran is determined to go ahead and do it, there's basically no way to stop them. Weinstein also thinks that Israel's actions can't significantly weaken Iran's uranium enrichment capability, and even though the US has massive 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs mainly used to penetrate underground and destroy Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities, the problem is, even if they take action now, those facilities still have the ability to be rebuilt. He also reminds everyone of this. Recently, it's already been publicly announced that a third uranium enrichment plant has been put into operation, and the location of this facility might be even deeper underground than the Fordow nuclear site. So in the long run, it's believed that there's no way to completely eliminate Iran's nuclear capability through military means. Second, the US shouldn't get involved in this war, because they won't be able to win. Mearsheimer said, "Do you all remember? The US, right? There was once a government that said they wanted to go to war with the Houthi forces. The US originally planned to wipe out the military power of the Houthis. Trump even made a promise about this, but after 30 days, he pulled out. The regional armed forces won, and the US just couldn't defeat the Houthis. If the US can't even handle the Houthis, how can anyone expect more from them?" Relying on military force to settle things with Iran, if you look back at the history of air combat, it's not hard to see, right? This kind of airstrike approach does have some effect, but if you want to completely defeat your opponent, the actual results are always limited. The US won't take ground action against Iran, and Israel won't either. So how can the US eliminate Iran's nuclear capability relying only on air power or missiles? If you think you can completely destroy Iran's nuclear capability just through military strikes, that's just wishful thinking. This kind of thinking is actually way too naive, you just can't do that. Thirdly, if the US gets involved in the war, it would be most beneficial to China. As Wesermore said, the US should have been able to put huge pressure on Israel to stop launching this attack. The US should have been able to reach an agreement with Iran, similar to the Iran nuclear deal reached during the Obama administration. The biggest threat to the US is if the situation escalates into war, leading to Iran blocking the Persian Gulf, and together with the Houthis also blocking the shipping lanes. He believes this would have disastrous consequences for the world economy, which clearly goes against US interests. So, he thinks the US has every reason to stop this war. Mearsheimer believes that the primary threat comes from China, and what the US should really do is focus its efforts on containing China. But the US simply can't do it. The main reason is that the US is already bogged down in Ukraine, and secondly, it's also stuck and unable to move freely in the Persian Gulf. If war breaks out in the region and drags the US into it, the US will inevitably have to redeploy more military resources from East Asia to that area, which clearly doesn't serve America's interests. The situation will not be good if the naval and air forces deployed in the Persian Gulf for several months are transferred to East Asia. After the end of the year, the US Navy's aircraft carriers are now leaving East Asia and heading for the Persian Gulf. They should have stayed in East Asia. From China's perspective, a prolonged war actually serves their interests, because it would tie up the US and make it hard for Europe to fully shift its focus to Asia. Now that the conflict in the Middle East is heating up, if the US gets dragged in and ends up fighting the Iranians in the Persian Gulf, it could be a golden opportunity for China to take advantage of. You could also say it's foolishness on the part of the US when it comes to executing their strategy. When facing China and Russia, the US has pretty much lost at every turn. So, Mearsheimer believes that the US doesn't need to have more wars in the Middle East. In fact, the US doesn't need any more wars, and East Asia doesn't need war either. The US just wants to contain China, and that's the only reason it would go to war with China. But if they really want to contain China, they have to go all in. This means that when activating in the region, they need to preserve as many resources as possible to manage the situation in the Middle East. Clearly, this doesn't serve America's interests. On top of that, not having attacked Iran has already caused significant damage to America's reputation. Because the US supports Israel, which is seen by most countries outside the West as a rogue regime. Of course, Mearsheimer's visit will raise questions from the perspective of US interests, not from the perspective of China's interests. But you can also sum it up like this. First, even if they don't join the war right away, they still can't keep up with Iran's nuclear capabilities and might get dragged into a never-ending war. The best option for the US is to negotiate with Iran and get them to give up their nuclear program. Second, if the US does join the war, it would benefit China, as it would allow them to negotiate and then turn their attention to dealing with China. Also, in the Social Affairs Quick Commentary, I'll talk about how the negative impacts of Russia's wartime economy are starting to show. Putin's advisor said that Russia's growth model has already been exhausted. They must look for new ways to get the economy growing again. Subscribers are welcome to go to the Sync platform to listen to my commentary. Hello everyone, besides videos on Bastille Post, we also have video content on another platform, Pomegranate Channel.
Pomegranate Channel has a lot of exclusive content, especially news and current affairs analysis about China produced by Chief Editor Lo and myself. Creating this content requires a lot of resources, so I hope you'll support Bastille Post as well. With your support by subscribing to Pomegranate Channel, we can keep producing more content. Thank you, everyone.